Welcome once again, my fellow manipulators of digital fate. I'm Richie, this is Capricorn. Today we got a ton of new spoiler leaks for Outlaws of Thunder Junction. A ton of new cards leaked out. It looks like a pre-release kit was leaked and all of the contents were on display. So we're gonna take a look at all those cards and we're gonna go over them. We're gonna see what they do. We're gonna see if there's any new keywords, any new mechanics. It does look like there's at least a couple of new mechanics we didn't know about beforehand that we're going to talk about. I saved that image for last, so make sure you stick around till the end of the stream, the end of the video, to make sure you check that out. All right, we're just going to dive right in here. I'm going to stop stuttering over my words, and we're going to start talking about cards. So first up, this is the first image we have. It's taking a look at the pre-release kit here. It looks pretty cool. We've got reward 9 million something or other for Oko. Robbery, fraud, impersonation, animal transfiguration. And then you can see some other flavor here. Little bits and pieces. TJ Tuttleman's Wonder Elixir contains 5% real New Capenna style Halo. It's kind of an interesting nod towards New Capenna. Thunder in Thunder Junction, probably. Sterling Company Office, something or other, Stagecoach attacked. Yeah, there's definitely going to be a robbery aspect to this set, for sure. So the two cards we see here, it looks like this is one of the bonus sheet cards here, Villainous Wealth. So I'm assuming this is a reprint, although I don't recall what set it's from. 1 blue, 1 green, 1 black, and X for a sorcery. Target opponent exiles the top X cards of their library. You may cast any number of spells with mana value X or less from among them without paying their mana costs. That's the crazy part of the card there. You don't have to pay the mana cost to play them. So if you can just play this for 6 mana, where X is 3, if you hit 3 big things off the top of their deck, then you get to play all 3 of them for free, which is pretty crazy. My mod Finn is telling me that Villainous Wealth is from KTK, Khans of Tarkir. I believe that's the abbreviation for. That makes sense to me. And then we have what looks like a mythic here, Selvala, Eager Trailblazer. Legendary creature, Elf Scout. It is a 4/5 for what looks like 4 mana, I believe. 1 green, 1 white, and 2. I'm pretty sure is what that cost is. Captain Crunch. You're funny. So 4/5 Vigilance for 4. It's a legendary Elf Scout. Whenever you cast a creature spell, create a 1/1 red mercenary creature token with tap, and target creature you control gets +1/+0 until end of turn, but you can activate only as a sorcery. You can also tap Selvala and choose a color, add 1 mana of that color for each different power among creatures you control. So that's pretty interesting. You have what's essentially a mana dork that can scale the amount of mana they make and can make that mana for any 1 color you want. Tacked on to a 4/5 Vigilance body for 4, which is already pretty awesome. But the first time whenever you cast a creature spell, create a 1/1 red mercenary? No, it's not the first time. It's every single time. So every single time you cast a creature spell, you get an extra 1/1 that can tap to give another creature +1/+0 until end of turn. But that ability to tap and give +1/+0 can only be activated as a sorcery, which is really, really interesting. You'll see with some of the other cards later on that there is a mechanic of some sort in this set that's making use of higher power. And it does seem like mercenaries are a tribe that really matters, which is really cool. But so far, I mean, this pre-release kit is looking really cool, really flavorful. Really excited about this set, to be honest. Moving on, we've got our first batch of cards here. So we're going to start at the top left, and we're just going to work our way across. We've got Irascible Wolverine, 1 red and 2 for a 3/2 Wolverine. When it enters the battlefield, exile the top card of your library. Until end of turn, you may play that card, and it plots for 1 red and 2. which means you may pay 1 red and 2 and exile this card from your hand, cast it as a sorcery on a later turn without paying its mana cost, plot only as a sorcery. So, we figured out what plot does. What plot is basically foretell, except once you foretell it, you get to cast it for free. So instead of, whereas with foretell, it was always 2 mana to exile it, and then a certain mana cost to play it from exile, now it's a different mana cost for each card depending on the card, most likely, to exile it. But then once it's exiled, you just get to play it for free whenever you want. So you just keep tossing things into exile, plotting things into exile, theoretically, and then eventually just start casting them all for free. It's kind of like Suspend and Foretell in a way, but with Suspend, you don't have to wait. With Suspend, you have to wait, right, for a specific amount of turns, whereas with Plot, you don't. It's literally just like Foretell, except the amount of mana it takes to put it into exile is going to scale depending on the card, and then it's going to be able to be cast for free. I think it's actually a little more broken than Foretell. Because even though it might take a hefty mana commitment to get some of that stuff exiled, you can set up for some crazy things. Imagine plotting a bunch of instants and sorceries and then waiting until you have a bunch of prowess creatures out, or a monastery mentor or something like that, right? And then just casting them all for free. Imagine plotting stuff in a storm deck, right? Oh, or like really anything that triggers on a spell being cast or a permanent coming into play or anything like that. You can just put all this stuff aside and then wait until you have those payoffs in play and then just fire them all off like a machine gun. So that's kind of scary. I agree, Finn. I hope it doesn't replace Foretell. Clearly in this set it will, but I hope Foretell comes back again in the future. Plot seems really scary, and honestly, I'm worried. It seems like it's poised to be just as broken as Discover, maybe worse. But we'll see. We'll see. But that's pretty nuts. Moving on, we've got Drover Grizzly, 1 green and 2 for a 4/2 bear mount. Whenever Drover Grizzly attacks while saddled, creatures you control gain trample until end of turn, and it has saddle 1. What this basically is a vehicle and a creature in one. They now have creatures that are mounts of creature type mount, and they are creatures that function independently by themselves, but they also have the ability to basically be crewed like vehicles, and when they become crewed, in this case it's called being mounted, which is actually kind of funny. But anyway, they get some kind of extra ability or upgrade to the creature. So in this case, if you tap a creature with power 1 or more, or any number of creatures with power totaling 1 because it has saddle 1, it makes the mount saddled until end of turn. And then when Drover Grizzly attacks, if it's saddled, creatures you control gain trample until end of turn. So that card's honestly pretty powerful for a common, I'm thinking. Are they called being saddled? My bad, Finn. So it's called being saddled, not being mounted. But it would be really funny if it was called being mounted, right? So that's a pretty cool mechanic. I like that they're making vehicles a little more useful and usable by not just being nothing until they're crewed, so to speak. By making these mounts that are creatures and just become better, when they get crewed, saddled. I like that. I like that design space. I don't know if ultimately I'm going to like it better than vehicles in the end, but I like that they're trying it. I like that they're going there. Mixture of reconfigure and one of your old custom keywords. Yeah. Next up, we've got Rooftop Assassin. 1 black and 3 for a 2/2 flash flying lifelink. That's going to be pretty good and limited. When Rooftop Assassin enters the battlefield, destroy target creature and opponent controls that was dealt damage this turn. Honestly, that's a pretty good card. Normally, the creatures that have that kind of ability are kind of less than stellar. I'm not super stoked about them. But a flash flying lifelinking 2/2 for 4 is pretty reasonable as a common creature. Very splashable in limited, and should probably show up in a bunch of decks, I would think. It's also worth noting that it looks like Assassin is a creature type in this set, which is exciting for me because I love Assassin Tribal. Any of you that have seen my Assassin Tribal deck, you know that already. Anyway, there's a deck tech for that on the channel. Look for it if you're interested. It's kind of wild. Moving on. Stop Cold. 1 blue and 3 for an enchantment aura with flash. Enchant artifact or creature. When Stop Cold enters the battlefield, tap enchanted permanent. Enchanted permanent loses all abilities and doesn't untap during its controller's untap step. So a little bit more of an expensive version of this type of effect, but it's at the common rarity, which is nice, and it turns off all activated abilities as well, so it's a welcome addition. Finn doesn't think it's going to be specifically Assassin Kindred in Limited, giving one of the cards later on. Well, we'll have to wait and see. To me, I feel like Assassin's going to be enough of a creature type in this set that we're going to get a decent amount of them to use in Constructed at least, even if they're not a full-on tribe within the set, as a build-around for Limited. But we'll get there, I guess. Next up, we have Wanted Griffin. 1 white and 3 for a 3/2 flying Griffin. When it dies, you create a 1/1 red mercenary creature token with tap. Target creature you control gets +1/+0 until end of turn, but you can only use that ability as a sorcery. So another example of a creature here that can make a mercenary with that ability, which is pretty interesting. But yeah, an evasive creature that replaces itself with another little dude that can pump another dude when it dies. Again, not so bad. So I feel like, just like with Murders at Karlov Manor, we're seeing the continuation of these play boosters having commons that are all playable. Gone are the days where, you had a bunch of commons that were completely unplayable, and it was sometimes tricky to put together a limited deck, and you had to be careful to figure out what you could actually make playable and what you couldn't. Everything seems decently playable at the common slot. Moving on, we have Rodeo Pyromancers, 1 red and 3 for a 3/4 human mercenary, and whenever you cast your first spell each turn, you add 2 red mana. There's got to be a way to break that in Constructed, right, guys? Like, there's got to be a way. Like, who needs like, there are so many decks right now that are using sorceries, 4-mana sorceries, to like make 2 treasures to ramp themselves to a 7-drop, right? Although I guess you do have to cast a spell to trigger it. So you can't just be at 5 lands and cast a 7-drop with this guy, right? And you also can't save the mana for the next turn. So it's not completely busto. But at the same time, generating 2 red mana every time you cast your first spell seems pretty good. Like, every 1-drop in your deck basically having text stapled to it that says, if you cast this first, it's free and generate a red mana, seems powerful, right? I'm getting crime novelist vibes. I don't think it's anywhere on that level, but it's got to be abusable. It's got to be abusable. Especially in a prowess deck, right? Next up, we've got Holy Cow, which is hilarious because it is a 2/2 flash flying Ox Angel called Holy Cow. Like, theme on point, right? So 3 mana, 2/2 flash flyer. When it enters the battlefield, you gain 2 life and scry 1. So, I mean, nice little extra versatility there. It's just a common. So, I mean, I feel like that's pretty good at the common level. Getting to gain 2 life, getting to scry 1, getting to flash it in, have your 2/2 flyer. Like, it's way, way better than a Drake. Am I right? Or am I right? We can make some cow tribals. It's not actually a cow. It's an Ox Angel. But that's really funny that it could fit into Angel Tribal or like Ox Tribal, I guess. Moving on, we've got Canyon Crab, a 0/5 for 1 blue and 1. You could pay 2 mana to give it +2/-2 until end of turn. And at the beginning of your end step, if you haven't cast a spell from your hand this turn, you draw a card and then discard a card. Which is interesting, because you can still cast things from exile, you can cast adventure creatures, and still trigger that ability, draw a card, discard a card, which is kind of interesting. It is an uncommon also, but I mean, it's got a really big butt for a 2-drop, so both of those abilities with the really big butt at 2 mana, probably worth it as an uncommon. Moving on, we have Neutralize the Guards, 1 black and 2 for an instant. Creatures target opponent controls get -1/-1 until end of turn, and then you surveil 2. That seems pretty good, because it only hits your opponent's creatures, right? And it's at instant speed. So you can use it as a combat trick. You can use it to kill stuff you otherwise wouldn't be able to. I don't think it's, like, really good, but the Surveil 2 does matter. Scry 2, that's kind of strictly better than Scry 2, right? If you need stuff in your yard. So I think that's a fine card. Moving on, we have one of the craziest ones of this batch, which we do have another batch coming after this, so stick around, guys. But this is Lava Spur Boots. 1 colorless mana for an artifact equipment. It equips for just 1 mana. Equipped creature gets +1/+0, has haste and ward 1. Is it just me, or is this card nuts? This is like the closest we've got to oh, what's that card called, guys? Help me out. Help me out in chat. The boots that give the haste and the hexproof. That card. Chat will pop it up in a second, I'm sure. But this is the closest we've gotten to that card in a long time. And that card is a staple of older formats. This just seems really good to me. Brownie Man thinks it's more like leather armor. Lightning Greaves, yes, Lightning Greaves. Lightning Greaves equips for 0, and you play it for 2. So the first creature you equip this to, it's going to cost you the same amount of mana as it cost Lightning Greaves. You know, 1 to play, 1 to equip, or 2 to play, 0 to equip. And Lightning Greaves only gives haste and shroud. Whereas Lava Spur Boots gives haste and only ward 1, not shroud, but also +1 attack. So, I don't know. Like, Lightning Greaves is definitely better, because shroud is shroud, right? But this card is still nuts to me. Is it just me? If you're watching this on YouTube later, let me know in the comments below. Is it just me? This seems absolutely bananas to me. Like, it's so cheap to get onto the field, and it just sits there forever. And like, always, whatever you play, you just pay an extra mana to equip it and immediately swing with it because of the haste. And the ward 1 helps you dodge some removal. Like, it's just always there to equip for just 1 mana. It just seems really good. I don't know. It could just be me. It's definitely going to be better in a deck that cares about artifacts, going wide with artifacts, because it's another cheap artifact that will add to that synergy. But let's move on. We've got another rare here, Malcolm the Eyes. It's 2 mana, 1 red, 1 blue, for a 2/2 flying haste legendary siren pirate. That's a bit of a mouthful. So it can go in Pirate Tribal, which is kind of cool. But just a 2/2 flying haste for 2 is pretty good by itself. But then it also has this ability, whenever you cast your second spell each turn, investigate. So it seems like a really good choice to go in some sort of a prowess deck, where you're going to be trying to fire off multiple spells in a turn so that you can investigate. But it's also going to work really well with the new plot mechanic, because you can save up cards and then fire them off for free to make sure you cast a second spell in a turn so that you get to investigate, which is really awesome. Then we've got Savage Smash. This is another one of those bonus sheet cards. Sorcery, target creature you control gets +2/+2 until end of turn. It fights target creature you don't control. That's for one green, one red, and one. So we do have confirmation that that is a reprint as one of the bonus sheet cards. Then we've also got Bristlepack Sentry at the bottom here. 1 green and 1 for a 3/3 Plant Wolf with Defender. It's notable that it's a plant. It could go in an Insidious Roots deck. As long as you control a creature with power 4 or greater, Bristlepack Sentry can attack as though it didn't have Defender. So kind of interesting there. I don't think it's super good, but in the right deck, it's pretty solid. And I kind of like that it's a plant, honestly. I hope we just get some interesting edge synergy plant cards that maybe can line up with Insidious Roots. Just be fun to me. And then last but not least, we have our first land, Creosote Heath. This is a desert, a land desert. Enters the battlefield tapped, taps for a green or a white, and deals 1 damage to target opponent when it enters the battlefield. So not only do we have confirmation here that deserts have returned, but it's a common land cycle, which means we're probably going to get one for every single color pair. And they deal a damage to target opponent when they enter the battlefield, which is worth pointing out that that is going to turn on committing a crime. So one of the key mechanics within this set is committing a crime, and a lot of cards will trigger off of whether you committed a crime or not. And you commit a crime by targeting something of your opponent's or your opponent themselves at any point in time. If you target something of theirs or them, it counts as you committed a crime for that specific turn. So these lands, this land cycle of deserts here, not only do they ping an opponent for a point of damage, but they will count as turning on that you've committed a crime sort of mechanic. But also, I'm interested in building some kind of a crazy landfall deck. There's a number of cards in standard now, let alone older formats, that can find non-basic lands, not just basics anymore. It would be really interesting to put together a deck that is able to jam multiple non-basic lands onto the battlefield in the same turn, whether it's from your graveyard or whatever the case may be. Just play with like all of these, and like if you just play 20 of these lands, you just kill your opponent without ever even casting a spell, right? But you could be playing, ramp cards that help you get the lands out quicker, or supplemental damage cards. I don't know. There's a lot of interesting things I think you could do with these cards that are easily overlooked. But we're going to move on to the next batch of cards here. Starting at the top left, we've got Sterling's Supplier. This is 1 white and 4 for a 3/4 bird soldier with flying. When it enters the battlefield, you put a +1/+1 counter on another target creature you control. So, solid white common for limited. It's got evasion. It buffs up another creature when it enters the battlefield. Can't really ask for much more at common, to be honest. Next up, we've got Reckless Lackey. 1 red for a 1/2 Goblin Pirate with First Strike and Haste, which is already pretty good on its own for just a common, to be completely honest. But it also has the ability to pay 1 red and 2, sacrifice it, draw a card, and create a treasure token, which seems kind of powerful, right? Kind of powerful. Being a generous patron can be considered a crime. You guys are funny. It seems powerful that your thing that's really, really, really good in the early game, because obviously this is going to be amazing on 1, right? Now has this alternate mode where when you get a little later in the game and the body just isn't good enough, you just sack it. And not only do you draw a card to replace it, but you get a treasure token to help you ramp. I kind of love that. I feel like this card, maybe I like it more than I should. I don't know. Let me know in the comments below what you guys think, and if you think that this card in particular is as good as I'm thinking it is. But it feels like Mono Red would love this. I don't know. Moving on, we've got Ankle Biter. 1 green for a 1/1 snake with Death Touch. That's it. That's all you need, right? Trade with their biggest creature, and you're good. It's also a snake, so maybe in Bloomburrow we'll get a whole snake tribe, and this card will be a little bit better, right? Next up, we've got Spring Splasher. 1 blue and 1 for, I can't read it, a 2/1. Whenever Spring Slasher something target creature something. Can anybody read this? We'll come back to it. If anybody can read this on stream and wants to type it in chat so I can come back to it and read it later, please do. I can't read it through the glare. Raven of Fell Omens. I think I can barely read through the glare. 1 black and 1 for a 1/2 flyer. Whenever you commit a crime, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. This triggers only once each turn. So 1/2 flyer, drain them for 1 every single turn that a crime is committed. Seems okay. Seems okay. Moving back to Spring Slasher. So it's a 2/1 Frog Beast for 1 blue and 1. Whenever it attacks, target creature defending player controls gets -3/-0 until end of turn. I mean, that's not bad. If you're in Beast Tribal or Frog Tribal, maybe it's worth it, right? It definitely seems like common filler, for sure. Moving on, we've got Dead Eye Duelist. 1 red and 1 for a 1/3 human assassin with reach. And you can pay 1 and tap it to deal 1 damage to target opponent. It's also a human assassin, which is important because both of those creature types really matter. But I like the idea of having a 1/3 reach for 2 that can block really effectively and then just use this ability to ping the opponent every turn. It only costs 1 mana, you know. We do have some creatures that can do this for free, but I feel like the body here is a little bit better than other creatures we've seen with this ability before, so it probably cancels out. But interesting card nonetheless, and it's another assassin, so I'm all about assassins. Bring it on. Something Something Brigand. 1 blue and 2 for a 1/3 human rogue. It can't be blocked if you've committed a crime this turn. And when it deals combat damage to a player, you draw a card. That's actually pretty good, right? A 1/3 for 3 that as long as you target the opponent or something of the opponent's, they can't block it. And then when it deals combat damage, you get to draw a card. It has its own sort of unblockability ability that can be turned on under the right circumstances without having to like necessarily waste a card to do it. Or, you know, enchant it with an aura or anything like that. And then it'll draw you a card every time it hits in. I have a feeling that card's going to be really good in Limited. Really, really good. Next up, we've got At Knife Point. 1 red, 1 black, and 1 for an enchantment. As long as it's your turn, Outlaws you control have first strike. And what's interesting is they've batched a bunch of creature types in as counting as Outlaws. So Outlaws consist of anything that is an assassin, mercenary, pirate, rogue, or warlock, which is actually super cool, I think. I think it's really interesting. So all of those creature types will get first strike. And whenever you commit a crime, you create a 1/1 red mercenary creature token that can tap to give target creature +1/+0 until end of turn. But only use that ability as sorcery, just like every time. But that ability only triggers once each turn, which means you can only get one new 1/1 mercenary for committing a crime once a turn. But still, it's really interesting. There's a lot of synergy here because that 1/1 mercenary that you make will have first strike from At Knife Point. And then also that ability to tap and buff up another creature gets substantially better because the creature that you can buff up is a creature that has first strike. So once all the creatures you're playing have first strike, if you got 2, 3, 4 of these mercenaries that can just fire off their pings, whatever power you need them to be at so that they can effectively push through their opponent's creatures with the first strike, you can kind of make that happen by using those tap abilities. So I actually think that card's really, really good. Outlaw, party, tribal with changelings would be bananas. Brownie Man thinks Warlock being included seems kind of random. I think it's because there's one for each, like, color, or maybe color pair of allied colors, most likely. So they needed an even 5. And Warlock just fit the description for, you know, the color or colors that they were missing. That's my guess. Next up, we've got Intrepid Stable Master. 1 green and 1 for a 2/2 human scout with reach. You can tap it to add a green mana, or you can tap it to add 2 mana of any one color, but spend that mana only to cast mount or vehicle spells. Makes me wonder if we'll also get vehicles in this set alongside the mounts. I could see that, you know, the ideas of stagecoaches or maybe trains, things of that nature to go with the Wild West theme. But it also could just be worded that way to allow it to have better interaction with cards outside of this set, you know, not just be limited to mounts. But either way, it's pretty interesting. A 2/2 reach for 2 that can be a mana dork is already pretty good. It's one of the better 2-mana mana dorks I think we've gotten, at least that can't make a mana of any color, you know? But getting to make 2 mana with it for your mounts and or vehicles could be really good. Your vehicle piloting the creature. Could you imagine? Could you imagine, Fuzi? I like this new mount mechanic. It seems interesting, and I'm excited to explore it. Next up, we have Magebane Lizard. 1 red and 1 for a 1/4 lizard. Whenever a player casts a non-creature spell, Magebane Lizard deals damage to that player equal to the number of non-creature spells they've cast this turn. That's interesting. So this is almost like a foil to people using plot, or I should say trying to abuse plot, right? If they're saving up a bunch of non-creature spells by plotting them off to the side, and then you happen to slam the Magebane Lizard right before they go off, now they get, you know, they get punished for playing a bunch of those cards all on one turn, because they're going to get a whole lot of damage, right? It's because it exponentially increases. Every time they cast the spell, they're going to take damage for however many spells. So if they've got 5 cards plotted that are non-creatures, and they're ready to fire them off, and you get the lizard in play, the first one, they take a damage when they play it. The second one, they'll take 2. The third one, they'll take 3. Fourth one, they'll take 4. And it just, it gets exponential and crazy. So I kind of like that there's this nice little punishing answer to that plot mechanic, because plot is just crazy. Plot is going to be so busted. I'm calling it right now. But what's cool is it's easy to include this in your limited deck, because it's not a bad creature. A 1/4 for 2 is pretty good on its own. It's not amazing, but it's definitely worth the inclusion if you're worried about getting run over by plot. So absolutely. Next up, we have Ornery Tumblewag. Mama says crocodiles are so ornery because they got all them teeth but no toothbrush. 1 green and 2 for a 2/2 Brushwag mount. At the beginning of combat on your turn, you get to put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. So it's a Luminant, a Luminarch Aspirant. It's a green Luminarch Aspirant, but it costs an extra mana. Whenever Ornery Tumblewag attacks while saddled, you get to double the number of +1/+1 counters on target creature. And then it also has Saddle 2. So Saddle 2 works the same way as Crew. We talked about this earlier in the video. You can tap creatures with power totaling 2 to saddle it, which is similar to crewing it, like for a vehicle. And when it's saddled, it becomes a better version of itself. In this case, when it attacks while saddled, you'll double the number of +1/+1 counters on any target creature, which at the very least, at the beginning of combat, you're giving something a +1/+1 counter. So then you at least get to double that 1 counter and get an additional counter. So it's never going to whiff, which is kind of interesting. Worst case scenario, if you saddle it, it swings. Even if it's the only creature on the field, you're going to go to combat, it's going to get its own counter, become a 3/3, and then swing, double its own counter up to 2, and be a 4/4, and swing as a 4/4. So no matter what, it's going to give you some value as long as you have ways to saddle it. And even if you don't have ways to saddle it, it's going to give you some value even if you're not attacking, by just giving you a counter every turn. So I kind of like this. I don't think it will quite be as good as Luminarch Aspirant because of the 3 mana, but I definitely think it's close. I think a lot of people are going to see the 3 mana and think that's way too much. But I wouldn't be surprised if this actually makes an impact in some standard decks by being a really, really good value creature. Yes, any target creature squirrel. Exactly. Next up, we have another one of the bonus sheet cards. Detention Sphere is back as a bonus sheet card in this set. So 1 blue, 1 white, and 1. For an enchantment, when it enters the battlefield, you may exile target non-land permanent not named Detention Sphere, and all other permanents with the same name as it. And whenever Detention Sphere leaves the battlefield, return the exiled cards to the battlefield under their owner's control. So super, super good removal here. You know, you can hit multiple cards if you use it just right. Always a staple great card. Kind of love seeing it as one of the bonus cards. Glad it's not going to be standard legal because it's just too powerful. It's just too powerful, guys. And then we've got a few different cards left. We've got another desert, Festering Gulch. This is the Golgari Desert. Enters tapped and then pings someone for a point of damage when it enters. Again, helps you commit a crime without even playing a spell, which is awesome. And then we get a look at the Mercenary token here, which looks pretty cool. You see the coins, you see the knife. Looks like he wants to try to do the bishop thing from the movie Aliens, you know? Oh no, he's just stabbing a wanted poster. Ignore what I said. And then our last card is Conduit Pylons. This is another desert, but this one is a colorless desert. When it enters the battlefield...
Just drop sharply while I was away?
Yes. All of the IQs dropped, Krebs. Congratulations. Desert. Enters the battlefield. You surveil 1. It enters untapped. Taps for a colorless mana. You can also use it as a color filter land. So you can pay 1 mana and tap it to add 1 mana of any color. Pretty decent. I think the fact that it surveils 1 and enters untapped and counts as a desert, all 3 of those things might make a lot of sense. It might make it good enough. If we have other desert payoffs, ways in which you can sacrifice desert to get value, or, you know, other things that trigger off of deserts, if we have any other desert payoffs in the set, this could be absolutely worth playing. Because if you really just need deserts, and at that point the Surveil is just gravy, and you're not worried about the color being colorless all that much, this could be an absolutely stellar card in just the right deck. So that's it for our Outlaws of Thunder Junction leaks today. Crazy that we got a bunch of cards. I think the best part was we got to see the new mount mechanic, right? We got to see how plot actually works. And now I am super, super worried that plot is just way too powerful because it just seems super busted. Just being able to set yourself up with a bunch of things in exile that you can all fire off in one turn. There's just too many cards that trigger off things entering the battlefield or spells being cast in a turn or whatever. And it just seems like, I mean, maybe they're all high cost and it won't be, but to me, it seems like it's super abusable. If you agree with me, let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you guys next time. Thanks so much for checking out my channel. I'd like to give a huge shout out to all of my patrons over at Patreon. Without you guys, this channel would not be possible, so honestly, thank you from the bottom of my heart for all of your contributions. If you haven't yet, like and subscribe. The more likes we get and the quicker we get them, the bigger this channel will grow and the faster it will grow. I'd love nothing more than this channel to become something very special for you guys, but it's entirely up to you how fast that happens. Also, if you'd like more deck text, that's somewhere over there. And if you'd like to see what else the channel's been up to lately, that's somewhere up that way. Also, subscribe, circle below, do all the things.